Welcome back to America Decides. We're following the Republican National Convention, which is underway in Milwaukee. That is where we find our Caitlin Huey-Burns. Hello, Caitlin.
Hey, John. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. So let me ask you about the first piece of news, which is JD Vance picked as the vice president on the Trump ticket. You were out and about running around the country all over during the primaries. What do you hear about the JD Vance pick, and how do you sort it inside the modern Republican Party?
Yeah, I was actually told by a source familiar that the JD Vance pick, he was alerted by the former president that he would be the pick just 20 minutes before Trump announced it on Truth Social. That kind of shows you what the atmospherics were like leading up to this announcement. It was very tight-lipped within the campaign, and we know from our reporting that the former president was still deciding kind of at the last minute. But I've been talking to a lot of people who were close to JD Vance and who knew him in Ohio, and there are a couple of things that kind of stick out to me about what he could kind of bring to the ticket. A lot of people have maybe thought of him as kind of a very similar to Donald Trump, and that's true. However, you know, I'm thinking about when the Biden campaign said last week that their path to victory most likely runs through the Midwest. They said their clearest path to victory runs through the Midwest. And JD Vance could certainly help in that way. But he also kind of has that Ivy League pedigree as well that has allowed him to tap into those big money, deep-pocketed Republicans. He was instrumental in hosting fundraisers for Donald Trump, more so than the other candidates, connecting Donald Trump to Silicon Valley and working that kind of crowd to get into Donald Trump's corner. So he can kind of toe this line in the Midwest, but potentially also reach voters in the suburbs with that kind of resume, and especially with his wife and family. He has 3 young children, kind of providing that contrast to the top of that ticket on the Republican side, but also to their opponents as well.
And do you, you know, the traditional job of the vice president is to be the, or in the old days anyway, was to be the attack dog, famously achieved by Bob Dole when he was vice president. But things are different now, and particularly with respect to the most recent events on Saturday. JD Vance was one of the first to come out with an intemperate response, blaming essentially the Biden administration for the shooting, when the President Biden has never said anything nearly as close to as rough about Donald Trump as JD Vance has said. How much of an issue do you think that is for them? And can you really talk about the level of rhetoric when the person you've just put on the ticket called Donald Trump America's Hitler?
Absolutely. I mean, JD Vance is on the record with very, very critical things to have said about the former president. But I also know from covering Trump that he kind of likes when people come back into the fold, kind of convert to the cause. And that could be a selling point for JD Vance. And you mentioned the attack dog. I think the campaign is thinking about it this way. They have put a premium on the ability to debate, to be able to go on television and defend Donald Trump and also make the case on policy. And JD Vance is often pointed to by Trump supporters as someone who does just that, does a variety of different media, not necessarily just Fox News. He has been on Face the Nation as well as other networks. And Trump supporters have been kind of impressed by JD Vance's ability to go on television and make a strong case for Donald Trump, not only in terms of kind of the overarching themes of the campaign, but also specifically on policy. But as you mentioned, all of that will be heavily scrutinized, and we're already seeing the Biden campaign going through all that, and particularly pointing to JD Vance's comments that he has said about Trump. But, you know, I also covered that Senate race that he ran in. A lot of that was aired during that Senate race. That's not anything new to the Trump campaign. JD Vance also was among the first senators to endorse Donald Trump back in 2023. And that kind of thing, you know, carries sees a lot of currency with this campaign.
Caitlin Huey-Burns from Milwaukee, thank you so much. In the announcement of his vice president, former President Trump says JD Vance will be focused on reaching out to American workers and farmers in battleground states. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. So, Anthony, we're in high speculation here, but what does the past in terms of polling questions tell us about JD Vance?
Well, we try to stay on top of these things with the help of our great political team, right? So we knew that JD Vance was in the conversation, so we asked about him coming into the convention, right? We asked about a number of people, Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, of course, who didn't make it. So here's JD Vance, and what you see is that for the folks who knew him, and that wasn't everybody among Republicans, but by 4-1, they said that they would be enthusiastic, they'd be satisfied. But this other point, now, by the way, I should say, this not sure, this is going to change real fast, right? We know that. But the other part of this, John, is when you break that down within Republicans by those who identify as MAGA, you get an even higher number who, in advance, said that they would be enthusiastic or satisfied with JD Vance. So they probably heard some of the rhetoric that you described. They probably heard that sort of vocal backing of the president, which MAGA, of course, would tell us that they really like. And I think one quick other point, this to me says a little bit about the sort of theory of the case of this election, which is turn out your base, make sure that everybody is happy and showing up because there's less persuadable voters out there, John.
And also, you know, given the relationship, and you can disagree based on the numbers with me on this, but based on the relationship that Donald Trump has with his base, if he picks him, the person he picks is going to be okay with his base.
Oh, well, that's also very, very plausible. Yes. So
where's the race stand?
Direction?
Where did this race stand before this most extraordinary event on Saturday? Just to kind of reset us on where things are. And this is, where's the race stand? And these numbers, everything's moving so fast. When were you in the field with this survey relative to all the various things that have happened in the last 3 weeks?
We finished this up. This is Saturday morning. This is before the tragic events.
Okay.
But this is where the race stood going right into that. We posted this on Sunday morning for the record. This is where we had it. Trump up 2 across the battlegrounds. But the really important thing is that we got estimates for all the battleground states. And there is this rather uniform shift toward Donald Trump from 2020. So he's got this narrow edge in all of them. Now, most times you hear me say a 2-point edge, that's not much. It still isn't much. But it's the consistency of it, John. In state after state, Donald Trump has this edge. And so what you see in that very uniform shift going on across the battleground states is, number one, there aren't necessarily state-specific effects going on here, and it's a very nationalized election, at least at this point. But the other part of that is that this then opens up more paths for Donald Trump through the Electoral College, and I think that overall reads as edge Trump.
Yeah, that's very interesting to see that Georgia and Nevada is essentially the same as those Midwestern states, because we had thought Trump was doing better in those, Biden doing better in the Midwest, but you're showing Trump's ahead basically in all those states. He's got options. Biden, well, we'll see. Yeah. I don't want to go on forever. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much.
Sure.